So there was a protein in there which survived the boiling, which was a substrate for Greatwall. So what Satoru did, what you have to do is to identify this protein. And so he purified as much as he could, gave it to our local mass spec people, and the local mass spec people came up with one of these high throughput, no output lists of proteins. So then the problem is what is Park7 protein? How do you find out which one it was? And here, I mean, this is pure Satoru. Again, he decided that he would simply clone, sequence, and express 70, I think it was 30 of these proteins in E. coli, and see which ones were heat stable and whether any of them were a substrate for Greatwall. So this is what it looks like. I don't know how many there are in this. Anyway, to cut a long story short, here's the P32 incorporation, and whatever clone number 25 is, it was a beautiful substrate for Greatwall. Fantastic, absolutely amazing, textbook. I mean, you couldn't. This is, quite extraordinary. And what's really interesting is this is myelin basic protein, which is what the experts on Greatwall had been using as a substrate. And as you can see, it's actually not a substrate at all. So they must have been twisting this assay's arm, something terrible. And when you get the right substrate, it's absolutely clear. That's not to say there aren't other substrates, but this clearly... So what is lane number 25? Well, we'd never heard of it, and I'd be a bit surprised if any of you had either. It was something called ARP19. ARP19 was actually discovered by Paul Greengard, another Nobel laureate who knows about this kind of stuff, but he had no idea what ARP19 was or is. And it had just lain dormant in the literature since 1990, actually. And then we discovered that there was a related protein called endosulfine. And endosulfine was supposed to be something that regulated insulin secretion, except that this was in 1992, and in about 2001, this group withdrew their claim that it was anything to do with insulin secretion. So that's not true. And it turned out what this family of proteins, which is conserved all the way from humans down to yeast, have is this little sequence here with a nice juicy serine in the middle. And it turns out that nice juicy serine is a wonderful substrate for Greatwall. There it is. That's a protein with just that. There are also sites for CDK2 and for cyclic A kinase in there as well. So then the killer experiment, you phosphorylate endosulfine is what we use for these experiments. We actually thiophosphorylate it. And you add it to the PP2A catalytic monomer, no effect. You add it to the catalytic plus A subunit dimer, no effect. But you add it to the trimeric enzyme containing B delta, and bonk, the activity goes. So that rather boring-looking biochemical experiment actually tells you that. And moreover, if you just use endosulfine itself without having stuck the phosphate on it, it's not an inhibitor at all. So this is an inhibitor which only becomes an inhibitor, a very specific inhibitor, after it's been phosphorylated by Greatwall. So that's the answer. Now, what happens if you deplete this stuff from an extract? Here's a control which goes through one cycle of mitosis and a second cycle of mitosis, and cyclins get degraded. The tyrosine 15 phosphate comes off, goes back on again, comes off again. WEE1 and CDC25 go bouncing up and down. Phosphoproteins get phosphorylated. Take away endosulfine, and the extract really, it can't degrade the cyclin. Tyrosine 15, interestingly, comes off, and APC3, it doesn't really shift up at all. And if you look at the mitotic phosphoproteins, they should be that dark, and they're only that dark. So the extract, basically, without this protein, can't enter mitosis. It's absolutely necessary for entering mitosis. And moreover, if you stick a phosphate, actually a thiophosphate on, and add this into an extract, what you find, it acts just like okadaic acid. It inhibits that phosphatase, and it forces the extract into M phase, even though you have very low levels of cyclin. Not quite right. You can see the shift in APC3 isn't quite proper. So I don't think there's much doubt about what's going on. And if you ask what does it bind to, the answer is this is a sort of affinity chromatography experiment. If you phosphorylate Ensa with Greatwall, it binds beautifully to B55 delta, and it doesn't bind to anything else. And of course, it binds to the catalytic subunit because the catalytic subunit is bound to B. And it seems to be really, really specific. It doesn't bind to other forms of PP2A, and it doesn't bind to PP1. So it's a highly specific PP2A B subunit inhibitor. I don't know about alpha and beta and gamma. We haven't tested that. So that's the answer. CDKs, apparently, this is according to Mike Goldberg, phosphorylate Greatwall. Greatwall phosphorylate Ensa. Ensa inhibits this enzyme, and that allows then, because this is turned off, it allows phosphoproteins, mitotic phosphoproteins, to accumulate. When the CDK activity is killed by cyclin proteolysis, Greatwall turns off, Ensa turns off, and the phosphatase comes back on, and we reverse it. So then the question is, how is this Greatwall-Ensa switch reversed? And the answer is, frankly, we don't know, because we haven't looked. And the only thing I can tell you, so we've got a PPY in there, which God only knows what that is, and there should be a PPZ or something here, and we don't really know what that is, except that one of these is probably PP1 to explain some experiments that I haven't had time to go into. And the interesting thing about this is turning over all the time. It's a constitutive activity. So the default, if you don't activate Greatwall, the system is turning off all the time. So basically, there's a hell of a lot to do. And one of the things that I've had great difficulty, I mean, this could be part of the timing, the mechanism that times mitosis, but I think that doesn't look quite right. It seems to be more of a, I mean, if you can sort of follow this through to your heart's content, it's very difficult to make sense of it all. I think the way to think about it is a kind of a latch mechanism. And if you think about what I mean by that is if you have a door with a door latch on it, like a Yale lock or something like that, you know, when you shut the door, it clicks too, and the door will now stay shut, whether the wind blows or not. But if you don't have a latch, then the door can sort of blow open, and there are various experiments which make it very much look as though this is a kind of a latch mechanism. And basically, this is sort of the take-home message. We're trying to fill our basin with water. We turn the tap on, but we've forgotten to put the plug in, so the water all just goes straight down the drain. Put the plug in, and the basin fills with water. And if you think, then you can turn the tap off, and the basin stays full of water. And if you think of the tap as the kinase and the plug as the phosphatase, that's really all I've been telling you for the last God knows how long. And this is sort of biochemistry, you know, what you learn at your mother's knee in biochemistry department. So there's nothing very special really here. And the only thing I would say is that this is really, I think, a very good example of how, you know, you only find out things by doing experiments and thinking of them. So we've got, you know, there are loads of questions that this raises, and we still don't really understand how it works or why it works. But I think it's clear that we've got a lot of... I'm retiring, so I'm not going to follow this up anymore. I've had it. But Satoru has got a very nice career ahead of him back in Japan, and that's where we are. And I'm really rather proud of this story because it sort of started with an idea and it ends up with some actual guaranteed facts and about something which has been around for 20 years without, you know, DNA sequencing and everything and prediction structure, blah, 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 but they haven't got a clue, right, until you do the experiment. And why would you ever have mixed this protein with Greatwall and then tested on B55 delta PP2A? I mean, you know, that's where systems biology really falls down, I think. So thanks very much for coming and listening.